There are people in South Sudan who were waiting to get the food, were turned away and told to not unload their food, and they left and they dumped the food, and children died. In the last century, which for the young people here was only 26 years ago, 500 million people died from smallpox.
Welcome to AI Unplugged Without Borders, the video podcast series from the Transatlantic AI Exchange, where we go beyond the headlines with the leaders shaping the future of AI. Today is another special episode. We are sharing a deeply insightful Fireside Chat recorded live of our recent Remarkable Woman in AI conference in Seattle. How to do good when times are bad was the topic we discussed as part of the executive dinner event in Seattle during our conference. Now, Larry Brilliant has been at the heart of historic moments, working with global icons like Martin Luther King Jr., Steve Jobs, Barack Obama, and even the Dalai Lama. His journey spans medicine, spiritually, and social change, playing a key role in smallpox eradication in India, curing blindness in over 4 million people, and shaping Google's philanthropic initiatives. In a world shaken by uncertainty, market turmoil, shrinking healthcare budgets, public sector layoffs, and rising global conflict, how do we find meaning, purpose, and resiliency? Here are the questions we were discussing. Are these truly the worst times or just a new kind of challenge? How can we do good when the world feels unstable? What practices help you stay grounded, joyful, and at peace? What message of hopes can guide these feelings lost in the most of political, technological, and economical upheaval? What actions can we take now to shape a better, more stable future? Now, Larry is without question one of the most profound, inspiring individuals in my professional journey. Listening to him is not only a joy, it's a masterclass in humility, wisdom, and impact. Please join me and enjoy the conversation. Thank you.
I want to tell you a little bit about what comes into my inbox. These are very hard times. We all know somebody who's hurting much worse than we are. We're okay, but we all know somebody who's hurting really, really bad. I have a very dear friend who's extremely rich and very successful. He has a trans daughter. He's suicidal because he looks into the future and he says, what kind of a world will my daughter inherit? How will that world treat her? In the Bay Area, as here, we have so many what used to call them guest workers in Germany. These are some of the finest people I've ever met in my life. They've struggled to come here to make a living. They send most of their money home to their families. Anybody who's lived around the world knows what they've gone through to get here. And for so long, we treated them as essential workers. In Italy, they sang at them from the tops of the houses. In Marin County, where I live, for some reason, we clapped and we brought symbols to greet them and to thank them. They were the essential workers who did the jobs that Americans wouldn't do during the pandemic to help keep us safe. Now they're terrified about going home because they won't get back in, even if they're American citizen. So we live in a time which is incredibly difficult. My world, which has been global health and healthcare, has been decimated. George W. Bush, who I didn't like when he invaded Iraq, I came to really like very much. I work with him. He made me the chairman of a White House commission on biosurveillance. And I got to know him and understood that the reason that he created PEPFAR was because of his Christian faith, because he had been instructed by his faith to take care of the least amongst us. And PEPFAR is arguably the greatest global program that any American president has ever done. That's been decimated. There are people in South Sudan who were waiting to get the food that would keep their children alive. And I have had children die in my arms of kwashiorkor. I hope you never see it because it's really death from starvation. And USAID, which was a great advertisement for the United States all these years, these trucks that had, from your friends at USAID carrying food were turned away and told to not unload their food. And they left and they dumped the food and children died. It isn't just these anecdotes. It's the cruelty with which they are being done that is so an anathema to who we are as Americans, or at least who most of us are as Americans. So this is a hard time. I'm frequently asked, is this the hardest time we've ever been? And of course it isn't. And you need to think about it in the warp and the woof of history. When we eradicated smallpox, on the day of the last case of smallpox, which was October 15th, 1975, a little girl named Rahima Banu in the village Karalia in the district of Patuakhali on Bola Island in Bangladesh, when her scabs fell off and there was nobody else to infect because everybody else was vaccinated, that was the end of an unbroken chain of transmission going back to Pharaoh Ramses V. In the last century, which for the young people here was only 26 years ago, 500 million people died from smallpox. That's not a word ho. 500 million people died of smallpox. In the summer of love, when I first came to San Francisco, a little boy from Detroit, Michigan, I had no inner resources to protect me against the allure of the summer of love. But in the summer of love in 1967, 2.5 billion children died of smallpox. It's not that far away. It's gone. While it was happening, the Soviet Union had 23,000 nuclear weapons pointed at us, and we had 29,000 nuclear weapons, some missiles, some bombs pointed at them. And during that same month, there were 5 broken arrows. You know what a broken arrow is? It's when a nuclear weapon is aimed at your enemy and you lose control over it. 5 times, 3 coming this way, 2 going that way. We were almost at the brink of nuclear war, which would have meant annihilation of such a huge percent of our species. It's not clear that we would have been able to continue, but it's gone. And it happened during that time. I think to some extent it happened because of that time. Because after the Second World War, when all of us peered over into the abyss, we saw the skeletons coming out of Auschwitz. We saw the firebombing of Dresden. We saw the mushroom clouds over Hiroshima and Nagasaki. There wasn't a big meeting, but we all seemed to make an agreement. It's okay to give up a little bit of our sovereignty in exchange for a safer world in which we won't do that again to each other. But we were in that same moment in 1975 when we eradicated smallpox and we almost had nuclear annihilation. So that was a worse time. That was a much worse time. We're not facing annihilation as a species right now. We've had really, in the vast spectrum of human life, a mild pandemic. Doesn't feel very mild to us. 1.2 million Americans, probably 15 million globally. It's not even as big as the 1918 pandemic, which was somewhere between 50 and 100 million people died. I want you to put that in perspective, because when you talk to your children, they're going to ask you, is this the worst it's ever been? And you have to have an answer for them. You have to reason for them to feel hope. It's not the worst it's ever been. It's bad. And it's not badness that is equally distributed. I wager that all of us are fine. We're not going to lose our house. We're not going to be kicked out of the country. But for some people in America who are Americans just like us, this is a horrible time, and it doesn't show any hope of getting better in the near term. So I was on CNN. I did 150 CNN shows during the pandemic. Don't do that. I mean, the ratio between death threats and love letters was favorable, but it wasn't zero. But I get a lot of people calling and saying, what can we do good when times are bad? I look at what happened with smallpox eradication. Of course, I'm an epidemiologist, so I look at what's happening with polio eradication. And you'll see all these little signs in airports. We're this close. We've been this close for about 20 years. $20 billion a year. We're this close. We're still this close. Last year, or this year, there were only 8 cases of polio in the whole world, not 8,000. Thank you, Gates Foundation. Thank you, Rotary. Thank you, UNICEF. And thank you for the countries that are putting up most of the money. But we're still just that close, and we still might make it if we don't screw it up too bad. But think about what one man, what President Jimmy Carter did. Almost single-handedly, he willed the end of dracunculiasis. If you've read the Old Testament, 2 of the plagues, one was smallpox, fat, the boils, the plague of boils. The other was this fiery dragon, the name of which was dracunculiasis. Its other name is guinea worm. It's horrible. You can get millions of these worms that are inside your body trying to get out, and they just go out through every orifice. And if there's not an orifice, they make one. It's a horrible disease. And when Jimmy Carter was diagnosed with brain cancer, he did an interview, and he was asked, "Are you afraid to die?" He says, "No, I'm not afraid of dying. I just don't want to die until the last guinea worm has died." He came really close. There were only 9 cases of guinea worm in the year that he died. One of the greatest men I've ever known. Maybe not the greatest president, one of the greatest men I've ever known. So how can we do the things that they did? The smallpox eradication program was suggested by a Russian, Professor Vladimir Zhdanov, who came to the United Nations and came to the WHO, the World Health Assembly, and basically said, can't we all get along? In the middle of nuclear annihilation, he said, can't we all figure out one thing that we can do that will bring us together? And he suggested smallpox eradication. Smallpox was the 4th disease suggested for eradication. The previous 3 all failed. We failed with malaria. We failed, how many of you know this? We failed with yaws, which is a spirochete infection. And we failed with yellow fever. We failed with yellow fever simply because it's a disease of monkeys, and monkeys do not like to hold their hand out to get vaccinated. They don't stand in straight lines, and we figured out we couldn't vaccinate them. But smallpox was eradicated because of hundreds of thousands of people who worked together. 30 countries sent physicians, 300 countries sent money. And gradually we worked in every country until we narrowed it down to India and Bangladesh, which is where the last cases were. But we were able to do good when times were bad. President Carter had a very rough time when he lost the presidency. He found something to do good when times are bad. I think each one of us has got to go home and have a conversation with yourself and ask yourself, what is it about your life's history that prepares you for this moment? And there'll be very many different paths that you'll take. I have a very good friend, Van Jones. You've seen him on CNN. We've done some CNN shows together. So Van's way is to never say bad about Trump and never say bad about a Republican, and try his damnedest to make friends with everybody on the other side without victimizing them, belittling them, laughing at them, and hoping that they'll reciprocate. That's a very noble thing that he does. And I just talked to him yesterday. It's going hard for him right now but it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do for almost all of us. We know that. We know that the people on the other side are probably divided as good people and bad people, pretty much the same as we are. We've just seen, a leader who's called out not necessarily to the good side. But this is not the time to score points. This is the time to find ways to bring us back together. So you want me to stop? What I think we should do is I think we should listen to what Kennedy has said. Take a deep breath. Not everything he said. No, go ahead. Not everything. But he said, Maha, make America healthy again. Now, he may not know that again, if he's talking about, 100 years ago, life expectancy in America was 40. Now it's 80 something. He may not realize that the reason we have a downward notch in life expectancy is 90% because of COVID. We're not going to get into why that happened. So, but he's right in a little bit. We can work to make America healthier and healthier again and again and again. Maybe not again the way he means it, but again and again and again. We can come together and build systems that make America healthier over and better each year by working together. And by the way, while we're at it, let's do that for the rest of the world because we're still only 5% of the planet. Thank you.
You kind of, yeah.
That's clapping for the rest of the planet, right? I mean, we can do these things. We're here in the center of global health. We're a stone's throw away from the Gates Foundation. We can do this thing. We can put our efforts into making the world healthier, making our families healthier, making ourselves healthier, making our friends healthier. And I try to do that in my company. Andrew, my friend Andrew Trister, tries to do that with his life. There's ways that you can find things from your history that make you uniquely suited to do the thing that you can that'll bring us together in service of something greater than us. We've heard that before. Somebody, echoes in every religion, something greater than us, and bring us all together in some common purpose.
I want to thank you very much, first of all, for your wisdom. This is a wonderful message. I want to dive a little bit deeper in what you just said, particularly with your startup company. And just for the record, I hope I can say this because you can watch it on the internet. This gentleman decided to get out of retirement and stop golfing because with his 80 years old, he started a new startup. Who starts a startup company with 80 years old? That is amazing. So you decided to start another company in your next phase of your life.
You could say it, 9th decade. You could say it.
Thank you. I think it's super impressive. But let's also discuss a little bit the market that we are all in. High tech, artificial intelligence, healthcare. What motivated you, A, to start a company at this point in your life? And B, based on the things that you just shared, things are tough right now. Research money is being cut. University monies, students, postdocs is all in trouble. Venture capital is not easy to find. Artificial intelligence is very competitive. What kind of guidance and wisdom can you give to students who are now in school and don't know what the future will look like because of AI? And in your particular case, how does AI is applicable in healthcare and
some of the greatest
human life?
Companies in history were created during the worst of times. Every depression, every recession has given rise to an Intel or to a Warner Brothers or to a company that was started when capital was scarce and everything was difficult. The contrarians have a point. They're contrarian, but they have a point. When people are feeling bad, there's not a lot of economic activity. The velocity of money has slowed. Somebody really with a vision has an opportunity that they didn't have when there was a cacophony of people saying that my way is the best way to do it. And lest you forget, Arthur C. Clarke, who gave us 2001 and all these other great science fiction stories, said, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. And we have not one but two right now. AIs are indistinguishable from effing magic, honest to God. But so is medical science. For the first time in our lives, we're beginning to unpack the fundamental building blocks of life and understand what they are. When I went to medical school, the idea of a cell was as above, so below. In this above looks like the solar system, so there's got to be a center, and then there's got to be planets orbiting. Those were called electrons. We thought an electron was a particle. Years later, we find out it's a probability statement. We're dealing with things like ribosomes that got the Nobel Prize from Venki Ramakrishnan. When I went to medical school, ribosomes were considered alien invaders. What the hell are they doing inside of my cell? We're beginning to understand how senescence is really just an expression of the fact that when you're born, every cell in the body is stamped with a sell-by date. It's got an expiry on the day it goes. And if it doesn't die on the day it's supposed to, so it can be replaced by healthy cells, it sends out a signal, an IL-6 signal, and it calls the entire inner immune system to come and eat it up and put it back into constituent proteins and put it back on the shelf. That's what nature does. But when it does that, the immune system lowers its guard. How many of you play hockey or watch ice hockey? Up here, there's quite a few. At the end of a bad game, the goalie pulls their net. If the goalie, in this case, the immune system, leaves the net, then cancer has a chance to recirculate and increase, and you die of cancer, even though you shouldn't have, because the immune system was keeping all those cancer cells in check. Every one of us have tens of thousands of cancer cells cruising through our body all the time, but the immune system keeps it in check. It's hijacking the immunity that allows that to happen. So this is indistinguishable from magic, folks. So we're living in a time when there are two great phenomenons, medical technology and AI technology. So I thought for my 80th birthday, I'd give myself a present and try to bring the two of them together. Because it's not clear they're going to play nice to each other. It's not clear. It's not clear. So I think what really did it was I went to Google X for a reunion of a meeting that we used to have there called Google Sci-Fu. And Google X is supposed to be the smartest part of Google. And I was a vice president of Google. I'm an ex-Oogler, as they call us, when they put us out to pasture. But I went to X, and all these smart kids were walking around with black T-shirts, and they had numbers on them. And one said 154, one said 149, one said 138. And I'd go up to them, and I'd say, son, and they were all men, young tech pros. And I said, what is that number? What's that 154? Oh, that's the number of years I'm going to live. Andrew Huberman, Brian Johnson, they said I'm going to live this long if I eat these carrots, if I take these supplements. And I was pissed. No, I was pissed. These smart kids, you're going to eat that supplement that you pay them $20 for, a month forever, and you're going to live 154 years. You don't understand anything about longevity. You don't understand about healthy longevity. Now, it's true that over the last 100 years, life expectancy in the United States has doubled. But that's because we don't let the children die anymore. It was a bad idea in the beginning. It's still a bad idea. But if kids don't die at 1 and 5, then life expectancy, which is defined as life expectancy at birth, it doubles. Doesn't mean that kid who's been taking that AG1 supplement is going to live to be 154. So I thought I'd look into it. The pandemic was waning. I didn't have to prep for these terrible, times with Anderson Cooper, who could ask me anything in live television. And I began reading about longevity, and I learned that there's something called the health span lifespan gap. That's an actuarial term. You should call it sick span. It's 12.5 years for every American right now, on average. So life expectancy is now 80. The average American spends 12.5 years in sick span. That's when you're on chemotherapy and you're sick, you're disabled, you're in a wheelchair, you're not happy. That's what we have to do. We have to figure out to compress that 12.5 years. And then I began understanding the economics of it. And for every year you can shave off that 12.5 years, that's worth somewhere between $1 and $30 trillion a year to the U.S. economy. Now take that all over the world, because it's not just us. Six-span is even greater in southern Italy, which is supposed to be the place where the blue zones are. The blue zones has been a great disappointment for those of us in the longevity world. And there's so much bullshit in the longevity world and snake oil that you really need a guide to go through that world. I have to tell you, it's really disarming to see so many concierge longevity doctors charging $250,000 for your first interview, putting you through these $25,000 a time tests. I mean, there's an easier way to understand it. And going back to what I said, we could all work together again. Let's make America healthier again and again and again. Let's reduce that period of six-span. We've all seen it in our parents and our grandparents. We know how hard it is. I think that's the Manhattan Project that I'd like to see. That's something to bring us all together. Let's give credit to Kennedy for the MAH part of it. Forget about the again and again. Let's bring everybody together and find ways to invest in our health, our children's health, our grandchildren's health. And while we're at it, let the little leaking of that new technology and ideas leak to the rest of the world, because they're brothers and sisters too.
How to do good when times are bad. I hope you found this message enlightening as I did. So, Larry, thank you very much for being here. A wonderful message. Thank you. Does anybody have questions, or we just go back to mingling? Feel free.
Love questions. And
He loves questions.
I love criticism, actually. You're far too nice. An audience.
Thank you so much. This was inspiring and uplifting and so important during this time. So we are gathering to talk about remarkable women in AI. How do you see this call to action relating to getting more women to participate in the solution?
I told you earlier, I did my first Remarkable Women in Tech in 1985 when I started the Well, and I gave a talk at Comdex with Geek Girls. They were cool. Any of you remember Geek Girls? They were, they were really cool. So, I mean, I think from personal experience that the more women in the boardroom, the better the outcome of board decisions. I think that it's fucking appalling that until recently, that none of the lab animals on which NIH based decisions were female. Until 6 years ago, none of those mice were female. Until 12 years ago, it was not a requirement of NIH that anybody in a clinical trial had, an XY set of genes, had two X genes. So it's silly. And we've lost so much. I think having women in the conversation in tech is going to change the conversation. I think having women in the conversation about longevity will help change the conversation. But actually, the main reason that I'm speaking to extraordinary women in tech is because I'd like to hire some. I mean, it's hard to find. But I think that we need to reset everything. We need to understand. When I was, I'm board certified in preventive medicine. I'm a fellow of the American College of Preventive Medicine. I should have known better. When my wife was perimenopause, I counseled her not to get estrogen replacement therapy because at that time, the prevailing wisdom was it was carcinogenic. I'm appalled that I didn't know better. We should know that for every year that a woman postpones menopause with estrogen replacement, she earns back 3 years of healthy longevity. Why didn't I know that? Why didn't I know that? I mean, so if you have a woman in the room, you'll know that. If you don't, you're not going to know that. So I'm really eager to meet them. I'm excited you're doing this. I didn't know it was the 6th time you've done one of these. And I think it's harder for women to get into engineering. It's harder. Misunderstanding that got Larry Summers fired at Harvard, so we're not going to go into what he said. But those of you who know.
All right. Thank you very much. Enjoy the food, enjoy the drink, enjoy the socializing. Thank you.
Thank you. I was very kind of you.